don't want to have people waiting.
Okay. You can hear me okay?
Oh yes, for sure. And we are live right now. Damn,
Perfect.
Daniel, we are live. There we go. All right,
Now,
so it's my stupid soundboard. I'm just annoying people on the stream every time I stream. Just annoying the hell out of everyone with it.
you can hear me okay?
Oh yes, for sure. And we are live.
If
Right
you've got that soundboard, I want to know if you've got the Wilhelm scream on there, because you've got to have the Wilhelm scream on there, or it's not a real soundboard.
Yeah, step by step, I'll figure everything out. So, all right, man. So we have you today. We have Scott Schneider. I met you at Disney when we were working
Yeah,
together for canceled project. It was the Tron 3, right? That's when I
yeah.
met you. But I think the best thing we could start with is maybe if you could introduce yourself a little bit, talk
Okay,
about your background and where you're coming from and what do you do and all that stuff.
okay. Well, I unlike a lot of the guests that you've had, I didn't get to go to art center or any of the art schools. I just out of high school, I went to a trade school for architecture,
Mm-hmm.
and the most valuable thing I learned from that is I did not want to be an architect. And so from there, I managed to apprentice for a guy up in the Bay Area who was a model maker on the first Star Trek film, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and I was able to apprentice with him. And I'm cutting this down short, so a lot of stuff happened in between, so bear with me. But so I apprenticed for him. He introduced me to a couple of people down here in Los Angeles. Mark Stetson was the primary one, and he was at the time head of the model shop for Boss Film Corporation. And in case some of you out there don't know who they are, that was a visual effects company that was in Marina Del Rey. And when I joined on board with Mark, they had just completed, prior to that, they had completed Die Hard and Ghostbusters and Blade Runner and several other films out of that shop. So I walked into his shop as a wet behind the ears, more or less a PA at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And was hired to help out on some sets on a commercial. And that was in September of '88, and I never left. So, I'm 27, 28 years later, I'm still doing this. But I spent the first 23 years building miniatures for film, so miniature effects. So about 2 years at Boss. Hunt for Red October was my first film, actual film that I worked on, which was at Boss. And then after a couple of shows there, I transitioned over to Mark had gone off and opened his own shop, and I transitioned over there. I was with his company called Stetson Visual Services from 90 to 95. And we did, I don't know, something around 70 films there in the course of that 6 years. So I did a bunch of stuff there. And the last film that we did there was Waterworld. So we closed the company on Waterworld. But my first film with Mark at his shop was Edward Scissorhands. So we did that. We did Batman. Yeah, it was great. It was a lot of fun. We did The Neighborhood for that movie, and
Nice.
it was a blast. It was a blast working for Tim Burton. And then we got to work with him again on Batman Returns, and we did The Zoo. And actually, the funny thing about that is I was working on The Zoo during the day, and at night and on the weekends I was making the Catwoman's claws for Michelle Pfeiffer. So I was doing costume work and model work at the same time, but on that crazy schedule that a lot of you illustrators work now, is where you're doing multiple shows at once just to make ends meet. So it's the same thing. Nothing's changed. It's just the medium changed. So I did that for a bit. Stetson closed in 95. I moved around a couple of other shops. I ran the model shop at VIFX for a couple of years. We did X-Files there and a couple other shows. Then I ended up at Digital Domain on Supernova, back again from Mark Stetson. He was visual effects supervisor there. So I was there at Digital Domain. Then I ended up over at DreamQuest on Mission to Mars and Reign of Fire. And then in 2000, I ended up in New Zealand at Weta, working for Richard Taylor on Lord of the Rings, and I was consulting them on how to do miniature lava and volcanic eruptions. So I was down there kind of for about 3 or 4 months consulting them on that, and came back here, and then started working again. I had worked for them previously on a few shows like Alien Resurrection and a couple other things, but I started working again for a company called Hunter Gratzner Industries that they later became New Deal Studios. And I was with them on and off for about 15 years, and we did, oh boy, the list is endless. Dark Knight, we did Inception was my last film with them before getting into the Art Directors Guild. And like I said, I'm jumping around here a little bit, but
no, it's all good.
After Inception, I had an opportunity to get into the Art Directors Guild as a set designer, and did that on the first Avengers. And so since the first Avengers, I've just been doing set design and as in the ADG. So and I just finished Pack Room 2. So it's been a good run. I have no complaints.
For sure.
So
no, dude. Here's the fun part. You started working in this industry when I was shitting my pants in the diapers.
Yeah.
I was literally. It was 88 the first time you worked, right? That's what you said. Yeah. I was 4, so.
Yeah.
I was just like.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Star Wars when I was 11 when it premiered in the theaters back in '77. So if you want to date somebody, you can date me by that. I saw Star Wars in its original release. So
right. One thing I just gotta quickly mention. We ideally wanted to share your screen and see if we get that going, but there's some connectivity issues, and that's why right now it's just my screen. I'm gonna keep trying calling you on Skype, by the way, as we have a conversation. If that eventually starts working, then I'll start sharing that screen. But for now, I just so people don't get bored with just us talking and looking at the Windows background.
Yeah, no. Doodle things on there. Doodle away.
Doodle away.
Doodle away.
Yeah. So yeah, it's holy shit. I mean, it's quite a resume to when I look at your IMDb page and what you've done, it's a lot of work, dude. It's like literally holy shit.
Yeah, I think there's something like, I think Pack Room is my 88th film that I've worked on, I think is what the total is. So yeah, it's been a few. But I'm incredibly grateful for every job that I get. And there's a lot of people, I mean, as you know, you don't do anything in this industry on your own. You're always surrounded by a network of talented people that inspire you, that keep you motivated, that keep you going, challenge you some days, both good and bad. So I've been very, very, very fortunate to do that. And, I've also, diversified myself, which I think is the other reason I kept busy a lot during the miniature days, is I diversified. I didn't stick to one thing where all I did was detail work on models. I did a little bit of everything. I could weld, I could paint, I could sculpt, I could, I could do the detailing, but I could also, I was also willing to show up at a set call at 2:00 in the morning and pull steam lines for the effects guys in the rain. So,
yeah,
you just kind of did. That was kind of part of it, and it was exciting. It was fun. It was a fun thing to do. So it was and it mixed it up. So I sort of became this jack of all trades and a master of none. So, and it kept me alive. So, but it also gave me a really wide view of the industry and a wide view of the different things that you can do and how they apply. And all that stuff still applies today. I still apply it to what I do as a designer. And I mean, I've always been a designer at heart, but I spent the first majority of my career designing and building. Now I'm just designing, but now I'm designing for people who build. So it makes it a little bit a little bit better on their end because I actually talk the lingo, so to speak. So
Yeah.
um,
I
it
just pulled up the
definitely.
list on the screen just to show people like exactly how much shit you've done, dude. It's insane. I'm just
in the
scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and
and
it never
scrolling,
ends.
yeah. And the early days, what was interesting about the Stetson days is there was a core group of us there. There was probably about, I don't know, probably about 8 or 10 of us that were kind of the repeaters. That we were there all the time, and we would supplement as we needed more people. We'd bring other people in, and then a lot of those other people that we'd bring in are regulars, but they weren't there all the time.
Yeah.
But you look at a lot of those jobs in the early days that were at Stetson's, I didn't work on one job. We would all work on at least 3 jobs at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the shop. So, I'd go over and I'd start painting on, a building for Hudsucker Proxy, and then I'd go over and work on something for toys at the same time. I'm pulling names out of my ass, but you get the idea. There'd be so many jobs in the shop at once. I mean, there was one point where we had 7 films in our shop at once, and we only had enough crew to do one of them. So we all split up our time, so you go sculpt something, and while the gel coat's drying, you go and you start working on something else, and while that's drying or that's getting prepped for something else, and you get to the mold makers, you're running over and you're doing something else.
Yeah.
So it's constantly, you're doing all of these different things at the same time. So it was a very different pace back then. Of course, much younger, I could do it. So the numbers of shows stacked up, but the number of shows that we did at Stetson was unprecedented, and that was due to Mark Stetson and Bob Spurlock, who owned the company, and they were bringing in work like crazy, and they just didn't stop. And so it was great. It was a great time. We all got a lot of experience very fast, got up to speed very quickly. And, you work into a routine where you work with people so much every day that you start knowing how each other's thinking. And it just kind of, as time went on, the machine really got honed really, really well, and it worked really great. It was just a blast. And then the time at New Deal Studios became that eventually. It was very much a similar thing where we had a core group and we were just cranking through these films. And there's a couple times where I think we had 3 films, but we supplemented with more crew. Like I think when we were doing The Aviator, we were also doing 2 other shows, so we had like 100 people in the shop. So.
Right.
It just depended on what you were doing, but yeah. So I don't do those numbers anymore, and it diminished as time went on. It diminished. I mean, because as miniatures started to fade away, it went from working on 10 shows a year to 6 shows a year to 5 shows a year to 4 shows a year to 3 to 2, and then you got down to where you're like maybe doing 1 show a year.
Yeah.
And you could, so. It just kind of eventually petered out. And after Inception, it was kind of the writing on the wall was like, yeah, I could stay on, I could hang in, but And the thing that really sucks about it is there was nothing wrong with what we were doing. There's nothing wrong with the technique. There was no flaw in it. It still works. Today, it still works.
I think it works better than VFX, to be honest with you. I mean, there are obviously some cases.
In many cases, it does.
Yeah.
In many cases, it does. I mean, the thing is I think where it works best is when you combine those materials. See, I've never, and most of the people that I came up in the industry with, you never look at any challenge or any problem with a single tool option. In other words, you don't go to your toolbox and have 15 drawers and 1 hammer.
Yeah.
You have multiple tools to solve the problem. And to me, what I thought early on, this is before reality kicked in. I got a dose of reality. But to me, early on, I thought, well, I think miniatures are going to stick around because now we're going to be able all the things that we couldn't necessarily do with the miniatures. We're now going to be able to supplement with CG, and we would be able to balance it out and really, because it's always about the shot. It's always about getting the best quality of the shot, but it always comes back down to the number,
Yeah.
And but I'll tell you what I think took it out the most is not the money, but the fact that they could change things on the fly at any time.
Yeah.
Along the production. In other words, when you build a miniature and you shoot it, you've got a known quantity there. You've got to build it. It takes X amount of time to build it, and you got to shoot it. And when you shoot it, you've got to set up a schedule, you've got to set up dates, you got to book people, you got to do all these things. And once you're done shooting it, that's it. You wrap, you move on. It doesn't just sit there waiting for you to come back and shoot it again.
Yeah, I mean, shooting
You
it's
can
when
you can do that.
Yeah, sorry.
You can do that with CG. Yeah, you can do that with CG. And the other thing is if the weather's bad, you can't shoot it. And you're shooting outside, you can't shoot. But
yeah,
you can do CG. You can do any time. You can do it on the fly. As long as you have time to prep it, you can do it anytime you want, and the director can change it. Oh, I don't want the camera there. I want it over here. Or I don't want that green. I want it blue. And
which is good and bad because good directors.
I'm not trying to minimize. Yeah, and I don't want to minimize the CG side of it. It's not easy there either. They just think it is. That's the biggest disparity you have in visual effects today is everybody thinks because it's in the computer, it's just magically easy and that you just push a button and it happens. No,
nope.
There's 100 guys that have to do that. And it's hard work and they get the short end of the stick for it. So that aspect of visual effects has never changed because when we were in miniatures, we got the short end of the stick as well. So all it did was transfer from one medium to another. So visual effects people are getting shafted now as much as they were 10 years ago and 20 years ago. So
I mean, just look at the rhythm and hues. What happened when it was the same night where they were getting an Oscar for visual effects. The studio was getting an Oscar for visual effects. They were actually filing for bankruptcy because they were just going out of business. So it just shows you where it is right now.
But that's because they were, in order to compete with each other, they were forced to put out numbers that were unrealistic, and that was ultimately kind of the demise of miniatures too. Is that it just got to a point? Well, one of the demises, but it got to a point where it wasn't cost effective because there just wasn't the money there to do what you needed to do in the first place. So it just kind of unfortunately it just kind of faded out.
It is what it is. That's how the market is moving, and now it's a matter of whether you adjust or not. And you actually changed your classification. You decided to be a set designer. You joined the Art Directors Guild, and that's what pretty much changed your career from that point on. If you would just stick to your guns, like, I'm gonna be model maker until I die, you would probably be broke basically.
Yeah, and I mean, when you have a family, as you've got to think about that. And look, don't get me wrong, I love miniatures. It's why I got in the industry.
Yeah.
After I saw Star Wars, that was it. Like so many people have made that same statement. After I saw Star Wars, I knew what I wanted to do. But we grow up, and reality sets in, and eventually you have to make hard choices, and you either adapt or die. And I love making movies. I love telling visual stories. I love design. I like the process of design more than anything else. And so as long as I'm doing it in some capacity, I don't care what the medium is, really.
Exactly.
And so I just went from being a physical model maker to being a digital model maker. That's all, but I'm still a designer through and through across no matter what the medium is. So and that's what I would say to anybody that's out there. If you feel like your industry is starting to diminish, don't give up on your, because everything you have, everything you've learned, everything you've done, you take with you. It's not like that just goes away.
Exactly.
You take all that with you. So you just have to be willing and enough and brave enough to take the leap. And it's hard. I'm not going to kid you. It was the hardest choice of my life was to walk away from one career and try to start another one. And and the funny part is I didn't know at the time that I was finishing up with New Deal, I didn't have anything lined up just yet. Avengers hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And I literally went home my last night of work at New Deal, and I stopped by Lowe's Home Improvement and picked up an job application for Lowe's. Because the reality is that I had to keep food on the table.
Yeah,
and
of course.
So you have to take steps to do those kinds of things, and you have to be willing to take those steps. And hopefully something positive will happen, and that you can move forward. But you also have to put the effort in, and that's it is a timing thing, And this is out to anybody that's out there listening. It's like don't give up. And just because something is hard, doesn't mean that it's impossible. It's just you just got to stick to your guns and you got to stick with it.
Yep.
You know.
It's
And at the
interesting
end
what
of the
you
day,
said. It's interesting what you said about when you were working in a different, it's almost like a different industry or sort of like a different set of skills that you have. I mean, they are somewhat intertwined, model making and set design. There are some similarities, but also there's also a lot of differences along the way. What you mentioned, however, the skills that you make, and if your industry is dying, it's not that the skills that you made and the experiences that you have are going to be meaningless anymore. They actually still keep there. I mean, I'm pretty sure the vast experience you have in model making is something that makes your job as a set designer much more easier because you have a very different perspective on what you do compared to a person that never done model making and only been in the CGI realm, right?
Right. Well, what it teaches you, or one of the things, it's not just the model making, because when you're doing all that stuff, you're on set too. You're building stuff, then you go to set. You're actively a part of the process of photography, which you don't get when you're in visual effects, when you're working in a company and you're just a modeler at, put an insert name here, a visual effects company. If you're just a texture artist or a modeler or, a compositor or, somebody that's just part of a pipeline at a company, you don't get the on-set experience that we did as model makers. When I was on set when we were rendering out our shots, so to speak, back in those days, I was on set and I was standing there and I was looking through the viewfinder on the camera, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking through the viewfinder as a filmmaker, not as a model maker, because I need to inform the model maker what I need to see as a filmmaker. So that's the thing that having that experience, and this is where I tell anybody, especially illustrators and concept artists, designers, whatever you want to call yourself, is if you don't own a camera, go buy one. And it doesn't have to be an expensive one, but just get a camera and go out and shoot pictures. And because it teaches you how to see things in a different way. And you look through a viewfinder, it's much differently than just, looking at a picture of reference on your on your monitor, or a sketch that somebody gives you. If you see it through a lens of a camera, you're seeing things as your medium is requiring you to see things, but you're actually doing it. And it also opens your eyes up to looking at things from a compositional standpoint, and from a photographic standpoint. Since they don't have that ability to go down to set and stick their eyes through a viewfinder on a film, do it in your life, because that you can do 24/7. Take a camera with you everywhere. Like I said, get a cheap one, get a small one, use your phone, whatever. But
even iPhone, right? I mean, even just shooting photos with iPhone. That's something I've been teaching a lot too, saying like having a camera where you go out and just having a camera, as you say, and using it for whether it's references or just photography for yourself and whatnot. You start to understand how camera works. You start to understand lenses. You start to understand what kind of lenses you have, whether it's wide or ultra wide or medium or telephoto or whatever. Like once you understand how things look through the lens, and when you work on a composition in very structural, almost foundation way, you start to understand how important it is to choose the right references that were shot with the right lens.
Absolutely.
Instead of using this random texture because it just kind of works. Oh, it works because it just fits nicely. Might fit nicely, but it would be totally out of perspective just because it's a wrong lens. It's now you have to edit it and whatnot. So.
And see, this is the thing is when you're building a miniature, you're always building it with them looking through the camera's viewfinder, because we're building for the shot. And so we're not building more than we actually need, right? So as you're building all designing this stuff and building it, you're always looking through the viewfinder, and that's so. But you don't necessarily get that when you're in this large pipeline of visual effects, people. You don't necessarily. I'm not saying not everybody gets it, but you don't necessarily inherently get that. If you're just a modeler or a texture artist, you're not predisposed to get that, but it can make you better at what you do because you're seeing things cinematically. And so that was just something that happened by virtue of the process with me with working in miniatures. So, for example, when you're designing if you're doing an illustration of an environment or a set or an interior, obviously you want to show what the environment looks like. So you're going to shoot it, you're going to render it out, or you're going to image it, sketch it out with a quote unquote wide angle lens, right? Because you want to see the entire thing and you're trying to sell that idea. But you also have to keep in mind that the director, and this is something you can look at, is some directors are long lens directors and some directors are wide angle lens directors, right?
Yep.
So you could design this great environment and then you get this camera in there, the director gets in there and he puts a 75 millimeter camera on it because all he wants to see is the actor's face close up and everything you designed is blurred. So, or he has to shoot so wide to get the set because he wants to see the set, but now his actors look like they're, tiny in the frame. So there is a process. Concept design for film is a process that involves filmmaking. It's not just about making beautiful paintings.
Yeah.
And it's the same process for set design. When I design a set, I have to think about how they're going to shoot it. I have to think about how we're going to get a camera in there and how, okay, if I put a long lens on this, if I put a 50 or, maybe not that wide, not that long, but maybe I put a 35 or a 40 millimeter lens on that. So it's a little bit wide, but not too wide. I have to think about, okay, well, how is that going to distort things? How's that going to tweak things? How is that going to look when I'm trying to get the actor in camera? And so you have to think about those things in terms of coverage, in terms of how the actors are going to look within that environment, and so a lot of times a lot of things get designed and they're all rendered out in these wide angle views, and then you go to stand on the set, the director's like, why does it seem smaller than the illustration?
Yeah.
Like, well, he used a 10 millimeter lens to do that rendering. So you have to be conscious of that and make sure that everybody's aware of that when you're doing that. Otherwise, you get to the set and it's like it feels too small, or you're laying it out in the drawings and it's like, wow, it seems really small.
Yeah, I mean,
And
knowing what lenses director is using, it's usually very helpful just even to have a better communication. When you work, especially when you work with directors, it's a little different when you work with production designers because you have a middle. I don't want to call production designers middlemen. Obviously, they have an immense responsibility to actually make sure that the sets are being built and they happen and things look like they're supposed to look like. But at the end of the day, it's a director that basically pulls the trigger and says, okay, this is where this is going. This is how I want it to look like and whatnot. And knowing the body of work of director, what I've noticed is like when you follow director's work and you know what kind of style they prefer, what it allows you to do is basically be more likable in an eye of a director, if you will, just by the fact of what kind of lenses you choose, what kind of color palette he likes, and then you use it for your work, what kind of framing he likes to do. If you, let's say if you work with, I don't know, Coen brothers, right? They like to use wide lenses. So when you do illustrations, maybe keyframes of specific moments from the story, from the script, and when you use wide lenses to sort of show like how this would look. It's almost like looking at, let's say, Fargo, right? Fargo is being almost entirely shot with wide lenses. And when you look at it, it's just like, what it does, it makes the characters look more funny because the camera has to be really close for the conversations. Now imagine if you... And it distorts them. Exactly. Now imagine as an illustrator or concept artist, you paint those characters from the long lens, which looks more like, let's say, I don't know, Michael Mann's movie, right? in that situation, it's like it's not really going to translate that well because the character is going to look more serious. You're going to feel like you're disattached from the conversation because you are far away. You're basically
Right.
far away. You're basically peeking from a distance, almost like spying on the characters instead of
Yeah.
being there and being right in the middle of a conversation, almost like you're sitting on a table and everyone is around you talking with you. But because of the wide
Yeah.
lens, you can see everyone in the
Yeah.
frame. So that's something I've noticed, and you know, it's a really good thing. It's almost like when you work for video games, for instance, that's a good example. When you work for video games, you want to prepare yourself and work and do the work that that specific studio will appreciate, and and you can show that, all right, I can do this kind of work. And so let's say if you want to work for Blizzard, you can do, you know, stylized work. That's always a plus, right? They will see, okay, you
Right.
can definitely fit to a project for a specific project. But and it's very similar with films, especially if you get a chance to work with the director. If you understand what kind of taste they have and like, and what's the way they like to work with, and whatnot. So I always, you know, that's something I've started noticing quite recently, quite frankly, and it's, you know, it changes the perspective in which I look at things, and it actually makes you much more valuable as an artist
Hmm.
if you can sort of conform yourself to a specific style.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure you're gonna agree with me here if I say, if you work with a person, whether it's a production designer, director, and whatnot, and if you impress that person, it's almost granted that you're gonna work with that person for like a long time.
Yeah. 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 And that's the thing. What we do as individual designers is we build a client list, and our client lists are production designers.
Yeah, pretty much.
And in some, and in your case, as an illustrator, as a concept designer, directors are thrown into that mix as well. Set designers will never be on the short list for directors. They just don't involve themselves with us at that level. So, but
Right.
illustrators, you're going to include that. But for us, our client list are the production designers. So that's, if somebody outside the industry wants to look at how things work in the industry, that's how it works. Is yes, we get in the union. Yes, we're represented by a local. Yes, 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 all that stuff. But we're still on our own to get our own jobs. But that's why we have to build this client list with production designers. And as you said, you figure out the ones that you get along with really well, and you find their style that you sync up with.
Yeah.
And and so that's why you'll see a lot of us will see each other on the same shows over and over and over again. So it's because we end up working with these production designers that have collected this group of people that are like-minded to them, or they just like their style, they like the way they do things. So it definitely plays into it. But the other thing about the director is, what you were saying earlier is, there are directors that are, they're the same way, where you can find the directors that are very specific, like certain ones use certain techniques. And, there's some directors like Fincher who will board out a film and he will shoot every single board. And then you will have other directors that will board out a film and they'll go, well, they're just placeholders. They don't mean anything. So it really is interesting to see the difference between the different people in terms of that dynamic, how they work. And some of them you jive with and some of them you don't. But I think, the good shows or the bad shows are as important as the good shows, because you get that experience of, well, I don't want to work with him anymore, or you just, why did they do something? Why did they do that? So I tend to look at everything as a learning experience. So
Exactly.
you have to kind of walk away, even from the bad situations. You have to walk away with those going, okay, what did I carry away from this? I'm not going to carry the bad stuff. What's the good stuff that I can carry away with this? So, but getting back to the camera thing and all that, definitely. I mean, if you're, if you don't understand photography, if you don't know photography, then and you are working in cinema or you're working in games and doing more cinematic looks, which games have gone very cinematic. I mean, I think we can both agree that the games have definitely gone cinematic.
Definitely, for sure.
So, so one way to get into that world without, breaking the bank is having a camera and just going out in the world. And even if it's on vacation, you got time off. But that's why I say carry a camera with you everywhere, because you never know when a moment's going to strike you where you're going to see something like, wow, that's really an amazing image, and just grab it. I was in Hawaii last year for 4 months on Skull Island, and I carried my camera with me everywhere. And there are moments where you just you pull off the side of the road, scaring everybody on the road, but you pull off the side of the road, and I got to get that shot, because if the clouds are breaking, the sun's coming through, it's casting down on the mountains just right, and you want to grab that moment. But so if you didn't, otherwise you're sitting there going, damn, I wish I had my camera, or I wish I had a camera. So it can be you can grab things that inspire you. Sometimes it's not even an image, it's just texture. Sometimes I'll walk by something and go, oh, that's got a really cool texture to it, and I'll grab it, even if it's with my phone, so it's things like that where you start looking at life differently when you look through the lens of a camera. And so I strongly encourage people out there who are either starting out or have already been doing this a while but aren't proactive in photography, is take it up. Don't go out and say, I'm going to buy a $5,000 camera body and $10,000 worth of lenses so I can go take pictures, and you take your first picture and it sucks. And you go, why did I spend all this money on this equipment? Don't do that. You can get a pretty decent camera for a couple $100 and learn the camera first, but just use it. Just use it. Get out there and use it.
Yeah.
And you can show them to people or you not show them to people. It doesn't matter, but just use it. And I think people will you'll start to see things differently. There's also a lot of film history that a lot of people either have not learned or have forgotten. You can study any Hitchcock film and it's amazing how well planned out his films were. Kubrick's the same way. That's why they are who they are, and you study their films and the way they do things. So, so I don't limit myself to just, well, how does this thing go? How would this thing function? How does this thing build? It's like, how would I photograph this? How would I shoot this? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I still see people like you, myself. We're filmmakers.
Yep. And
everything else is just tools and skills that we use to make that happen. So, I think it's if you want to get into that, if you want to stand out in that environment, then you definitely want to. You want to take those kinds of things to heart. I know a lot of guys have gone out and made their own little short films, and that's fantastic. It's great that they're doing that because it teaches you a lot. I've kind of done that already, just in the sense that coming from a miniature background, I've already been on set a million times and shot a million things, so I kind of don't want to do it anymore because it's grueling work, or it can be. But if you're starting out, it's definitely a good place to go. So, anyways, that was kind of a rambling, but you get the idea.
No, I do. Yeah. So I got a follow up on this. I don't think a lot of people understand what exactly set design really is, and I think it would be nice to get deeper into that conversation. Explain how set design works in film and what exactly you do as a set designer compared to what I would do as an illustrator in a film.
Okay. Well, the basic premise is that the basic difference is you produce an image that generates it sets a tone visually, both in color palette and in terms of emotion. And whether it's an environment or a vehicle or a set or whatever, you're setting a tone. You're establishing something that people can respond to. And I take what the set designer does is the set designer takes that concept and turns it into working drawings. So if you want to draw a comparison to another industry, it's similar to architecture in that you'll have an architect will do a concept of a building, and then he will have a team of architects that will sit and they will draw out the building. They will figure out the foundation. They will figure out the electrical plan, the plumbing plan, the all of those things. It's the same thing for set designers. It's not as involved as what an architect does, but we're still doing all those things. We're laying things out. We're planning out where the cameras are going to go, where the lights go. We're planning out how much of the set we actually have to build. And one of the interesting ways I heard set design described was that because we don't dictate to construction how they're going to build something. What we dictate to construction is the line to which they're going to build to. And the best description I heard of it from a buddy of mine was that we put lines on paper so that the painters know where to put the paint. And so we're defining boundaries. We're creating a roadmap for construction to build these sets. And it's in combination with the illustrators that it's the combination of those two techniques that generate these sets and produce the final look. So it's definitely, especially now in the 3D world and the digital age, it's become a much more in-depth marriage between concept artists and set designers. Mm-hmm. And there used to be a time where you would see the concept artists coming on much, much farther ahead of the set designers. Now we're starting to see that time shrink where you're actually bringing set designers and illustrators in at the same time. Not on every show, so that they can work together on laying out these sets. But, a lot of times on these movies, we'll have a stage that has only so much room, and we have to fit that set on that stage. Yeah. So you can't have an illustrator design something that's 5 times bigger than the building that you're building in, and then the set designer has to figure out how to make something that looks 5 times bigger fit into something that's 5 times smaller. It's really kind of making the illustrations that are done, it's turning them and making them honest, so to speak, and then just laying it out so that construction guys can look at these drawings and go, I know what to build. And it's a roadmap, it's a blueprint. I mean, there's a million different things that you could call it, but it's really just a detailed breakdown of all the components that make up a set or a vehicle or a prop or, whatever it may be, so that these guys can decimate it down and then build those components. Because there's going to be components that need to be sculpted. There's going to be components that need to be milled out of wood. There's going to be components that are going to be machined out of metal. All that has to be broken down and explained. Yeah. Material finishes have to be explained. You can hand an illustration to somebody and say, go build that. And what you're going to get is their interpretation of what that is. Yeah. And they're going to take shortcuts and they're going to do things that they have to do in order to make it look like that illustration. Well, sometimes that illustration may not be telling the entire truth. And so the set designer has to take that illustration and make it into something that construction can read and can break down, and also to budget. We have to budget these things. So it's really hard to look at an illustration and go, that's going to cost X amount of dollars. Yeah. You really got to break it down into a set drawing and go, well, how many square feet is it? How tall do we have to go? Is this glass or is this concrete? Because glass is more expensive than concrete. We get into that nitty gritty detail that the illustrations just don't, and are not meant to. Now, an interesting history lesson here, which I'm sure a lot of people don't know, is that back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I mean back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, early 70s, right up until the mid to late 80s, the illustrator There weren't concept designers. There were no concept artists. There were no concept illustrators. That the word concept didn't come in until much later.
Yeah,
They were illustrators.
that's true.
And what the illustrators did was they came in after the set designers and the art directors. And there were no production designers. The art director, the lead art director, designed the set. He laid it out in very, very simple form. The set designer would draw it in 2D plan and elevation based on what they could fit on the stage. They would then give that 2D plan and elevation to the illustrator. The illustrator would transpose it into an isometric or perspective view, and then they would do an illustration of it in gouache or something else to demonstrate color and lighting. It wasn't about design, it was about color and lighting, because the design was already done. The art director already did
about
that.
illustration.
It was really about setting the tone and the mood of the scene. In other words, the illustrator was informing the director of photography what the tone and the mood of that scene and within that environment is supposed to be. Somewhere around the mid-90s, it started shifting, and the illustrator started, and a lot of people credit Lucas for doing that with Ralph McQuarrie, because he had Ralph McQuarrie do all these concept paintings for Star Wars as pitch artwork. That sort of sparked this whole thing of doing pitch artwork to get a film sold. You didn't have a script, but we have all this beautiful artwork. So
Yeah.
That sort of started this, and I couldn't tell you, pinpoint exactly who started it and who's to blame for it or who's, whatever.
For nicely put.
It depends on how you want to, what perspective you want to look at.
Yeah,
But,
of course. Just joking around here. That's
so
funny.
it's one of these things that just sort of manifested over time, and the production designer credit sort of manifested over time. It's not even really an official title credit, because there's still waivers for it, right? So, and actually, a lot of people don't realize, or most people don't know this, but the Wizard of Oz, the quote production designer of Wizard of Oz, he was an art director, but he was given that specific title, production designer, on that film because he was literally designing the entire look of the entire film, not just the sets. So it was a much, much broader scope. And then years later, it started becoming this thing, and now it's pretty much ingrained, So there's been a shift in terms of the hierarchy and the way things work in the industry. And some production designers are more storytellers. Some production designers are more visual tellers. It just depends on who you're working for. Some are more, tech nerds. They're into the tech. They don't really care about anything else. They're just into the tech. And some are, it doesn't matter. If they get hired, they're getting hired to do a job for whatever particular talent that they bring to the table. So if you've got something that somebody wants, then more power to you. So, but at any rate, it's so set design things have kind of shifted a little bit, but on these higher end films where we're doing a lot of, high conceptual design, so to speak, for, we're doing spaceships, we're doing, fancy interiors, we're doing, giant fighting robots, we're doing, really high concept stuff, and all of this stuff has to be custom made. So the process for that has to be broken down a lot further than it used to be. And we've also got new manufacturing techniques that we're now doing. It's not just guys sitting down in a mill cutting out wood. You've got CNC, 5-axis CNC milling going with foam and different materials. You've got 2D CNC milling going on with wood materials, MDF and plywood. You've got laser cutting. You've got water jet cutting. You've got 3D printing. You've got all these different methodologies are happening, and all of those things have to be accounted for. As a set designer, we have to think about, well, we're going to do this as a laser cut. We're going to do that as a water jet. We're going to do this as a CNC. And all that has to be broken out, and now we need 3D files for all of that. So it's definitely changed, especially on these high-end films that you and myself have been working on quite a bit lately. It's just the demand is higher, and also the level of quality has increased dramatically. Back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you look at a prop on film and it's like, wow, that looks amazing. It looks cool. And then you see it in person and like, wow, that's a pile of crap. That's really, it did. Are you sure that's the one that was in the film? Because the one in the film looks a lot better than this one. It's like, no, that's the one that was in the film. The reason is because when we were shooting on film stock has a lot of forgiveness.
Yeah.
Now we're shooting digital. Now we're shooting 4K, and I think now we're getting into 5K. It's profoundly affected the quality of which we have to build these sets. We are now building sets and props and doing makeup at high-end, industrial manufacturing levels, right? The stuff we're doing, we're now using all the things that the major companies are working. I mean, we're manufacturing, we're making parts to the level of standards that Apple and all these other companies that have had as a staple for their entire run. We're now starting to do that. The quality of the finishes on these sets is unbelievable. So when you see one in person, you're like, wow, it looks amazing. And it's like, yeah, it does. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it has to look great on the camera. And it's funny because expectations arise as well,
Which just makes the demand on everybody else that much higher, because for illustrators, the demand is much higher now, because now you're being asked to really, really become product designers or industrial designers or boat designers or car designers, and I'm not talking the
fashion
film
designer.
industry version. You're really, you're really actually doing things to the level of quality that's expected in a company where you have a lead time of, could sometimes up to years, and we have weeks, maybe months. And so that's another profound impact that's happened on us, is the level of quality and the amount of work has doubled, if not tripled. But the amount of time in order to do it has gone the other direction. So you really have to step up your game. You have to move with the times. You have to stay savvy with all the software as much as you can afford. And you know how it is. It's always that race to try to find the next thing that will get that render done a little faster. Make that Boolean a little cleaner, or it's all about that. And it's sort of a rabbit hole that we all fall down, but it's sort of a necessary evil that we have to fall down. So, because the quality of the work has gone so far up, and it's just going to keep going. It's not going to change. And the demand on you illustrators has gotten that way. I mean, we went from one day it used to be, gouache painting on cardstock, and now it's all digital, and we need this to be 4K, 5K resolution, and it has to be almost, we went from a period of time with illustration where, it was an illustration. It was clear that it was an illustration. What I'm talking about is like when you look at Ralph McQuarrie, is a very stylized, illustrative look of what Star Wars is. Nowadays, it's like, I want the illustration to look like what it's going to look like in the film. I want it to look.
Yeah, can you design the way the film's going to look like so I don't have to do that?
Right. Right. It's gotten to that point where it's like, can you just show me what it's going to look like? So it's increased the demand, which of course, on the one hand is great for us because it keeps us busy. On the other hand, it's like, oh God.
Or to put it in a way so it doesn't sound so horrifying, it's more of if you can produce really high quality work in terms of the realism and how close you can get to the actual look of the film, that's what actually gets you jobs. That's what people are looking for, because now you're just removing obstacles from the road. You're just removing additional questions that may arise when you're doing a concept or when you're doing an illustration or when you're doing even the set design, right? When you can produce work and provide assets that basically remove as many problems, as many questions as they can, that's what actually gets you hired. I can give you a good example from my own experiences. I've been learning Fusion 360 quite a lot recently, and it's basically a CAD software. It's basically what you would use to design a chair, or you would use to design a product, basically. It's something that it's a design tool, if you will, right? It's not really a concepting tool. It's a design tool where almost you have to be precise in if you want to make it work, if you want to make it not crash in the first place.
Right.
You have to
Right.
work within the boundaries of what's possible in milling and
Yeah.
cutting and all those things.
Yeah.
Um, the funny thing is, like, the moment I started using it as a tool of illustration, I've noticed also that it also gives quite a lot of assets that normally are not expected of you, but if you can
Hmm.
deliver, that
Yeah.
makes your work so much more valuable, right?
Yeah.
A good
Yeah.
example is on one of the recent shows. I'm not gonna say which one. Obviously, gonna show that work when it's ready, and I think you guys gonna like it. But one of the recent shows I've been working on, I was designing weapons, and the
Uh-huh.
way I was designing them, I was making them inside of Fusion. Now, I would do obviously my renders in Octane and play around with 3D and do some little touch ups in Photoshop, all that regular illustration jazz. But the majority of design work would be done inside of Fusion. So
Yeah.
what happened is the moment I started sending IGS format files or step format,
Mhm.
basically the 3D CAD format files,
Yep.
a week after I would see photos from the set where it's actually fucking printed or cut out from
Right.
metal and it looks
Right.
exactly like the design. And there's really
Right.
not much work that I had to do. It's basically just
Right.
press print or press fucking, I don't know, mill,
Yeah.
just
Yep.
basically
Well,
removing quite a lot of headaches and
yeah.
headway or labor that you would have to go through from that point to where it's actually a film asset, basically.
Absolutely. No, that's the thing. I mean, I've told this to several illustrators in the past, is the more, if you're going to build a model, the more accurate you build it, the more likely it's going to translate directly over. Because if I don't have to rebuild it, I'm not going to.
Yeah,
There's no
exactly.
point in me rebuilding it. If it was built good and it was built clean and it was built right, meaning it fits all the needs that have to be met on the physical build, why would I rebuild it? So, it's absolutely wonderful when I get those kinds of files. There's because as far as my sets go, I primarily work in Rhino.
Yeah, I think that's like a
Actually,
standard right now, right? With most of the
yeah.
designers. Yeah.
Well, yeah, just because it's so freeform,
Yeah.
and the price point on it is really reasonable compared to something like Alias. Although, there's a few guys out there that are using SolidWorks.
Joe is
And
the one, right?
Joe and
Yeah.
Rob Johnson both use it, and there's a couple other guys, but and it's fantastic. And it's funny actually. 360, I actually beta tested it before it came out, and it immediately what it did is it said, oh, this is Autodesk's version, their version of SolidWorks, but with the T-splines component built into it, which was really nice. But I've stuck with Rhino just because it has. I don't know the only way I can really put this is it works the way my brain works,
Yeah.
which is sort of erratic and
It's just a software, really,
Yeah, I love 360. It's a great tool. I love SolidWorks. It's a great tool. My brain just doesn't work that way. I'm a little more free form, kind of throw things on a bench and start playing with shapes and messing around with it. And so I never quite clicked into that, but they're awesome softwares. They really are. And there's many times where having that parametric ability would have been
Yeah.
very, very nice. But I find that more often than not, it's a bigger problem with so much of the designs that we do, because they'll come in and change a design. They won't change it a little bit. They'll change it so much that you're basically throwing out everything you just did.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So Rhino is my primary. Moto is in terms of getting out CAD drawings and getting out engineering models. I use Rhino, but I do my initial development in Moto, just because it's fast. and the other reason is because a lot of illustrators are using it, so I can get my files to them seamlessly without a problem. They can do a render, they can paint over it and do whatever they need to do. I can get it back, and I know that it was already built in such a fashion that I can translate it fairly quickly and fairly easy into Rhino without having to rebuild most of it. You know, there might be a couple of pieces I have to do, but the majority of it I can get into Rhino without having to rebuild it.
Yep.
Which is a nice feature because you can actually save out of Moto as a 3DM, a Rhino 3DM. So it'll just open it up. It's still a mesh, but you can convert it and you can do things with it. So
yeah.
And you have the same ability in Fusion because you've got the T-splines component where you can build a sub-D surface and you can convert it to NURBS, and it changes it to NURBS patches, and it's much, much better. And so there's a lot of benefits to that. So yeah, when I hear you tell me about handing off files to people and seeing them in IGES, yeah, you're making a lot of engineers and a lot of set designers and a lot of construction guys very, very happy because they don't have to go through the process of rebuilding it. Because if it's a mesh, 9 out of 10 times they got to rebuild it.
Yeah, I mean, even on Tron when we were working together, you know, it would be sort of like going back and forth with the IGS files. And I would do an illustration on top of it,
Yeah.
and then, you know, you guys would rebuild it or add some elements, and maybe I would add some elements and send you IGS. You would just refine it, clean it up, because obviously I work as I'm just concept farting, and you guys are actually have to. Man, it's not. Why he's doing this? But at least it's like a starting point for you guys, and it definitely helps. Then you just going in and trying to interpret what's in the design and just basically work on an interpretation. Now it's like it is design, it is there, and we can work in more of a synergy to create something that is really cool. And I really liked that show, by the way, because we just blasted through so many sets so fast. Oh my God, dude, that was I think that was the fastest going show I've been working on, like in terms of how many things we've done in a short period of time.
Yeah. It was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy, and just on the vehicles alone, where we were going from concept to getting started on them.
Yeah.
In a pretty short amount of time.
That was a team, though.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Ed was there. Joe was there. I mean, come on, that was like the dream team.
Oh yeah, no, it was a fantastic team. We had it, you know, and it's funny too because I had several conversations, and I know I'm not the only one that had these conversations, but you find yourself talking to somebody else and going, God, I don't know if I can meet up to these guys. You know, you start comparing yourself to everybody else that's there, and you're going, God, these guys, why am I here? These guys are so much better than me.
Exactly.
And then you walk by and you overhear somebody else that you were just talking about going, why am I here? They're so much better than me. You know, we're all kind of second guessing ourselves because the quality of the people that we were surrounded by in that environment was so amazing.
Yeah.
So it's the game has changed a lot in that respect, that you get to work with people that are they're really dedicated to their craft, and they're really good at what they do, and they love work. You know, I don't care about what movie I work on. I really don't. I've done them all. You know, I mean,
yeah.
You saw the list. What have I not done? So it's not about the movie for me. For me, it's about the people I work with. I want to work with cool people. I want to work with people that I can learn from. I want to work for people that can learn from me. You know, I like showing people things as much as I like learning things. So I like being in an environment where the process of design is a development process that we all go through, and we all get to a position, and we can all sit back and go, yeah, there it is. That's, you know, bitching, we did it, you know, and you can be proud of that because it's something that we all collectively kind of pull together. That's the process I like. It's that development of the design and that development of the aesthetic that we're trying to put into this thing. We can't control the script. We can't control the acting. We can't control the directing. We don't have any control over any of that. And so you have to kind of put that to bed, and you have to realize, okay, I have complete and utter control over what I bring to the table. And so it's up to me to make sure that my part is to the level of standard that it needs to be to stay in line with everybody else that's here. But it's exciting to be in an environment where you're going, God, I hope I can do this, you know?
Yeah.
And that was, you know, and you're going to run into that. You're going to be in other environments where you don't even think about that. You just kind of in the flow of things. It just depends on. It really depends on the show. I did a show. Oh God, I guess it's 2 years now. It came out this year, the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant,
Mm-hmm.
and had to have been one of the best experiences of my life. It was only a couple of months long, but I essentially got to work with Michelle Moen, who I knew back from Boss Film. I don't know if you know Michelle, but she's
No.
an illustrator, fantastic illustrator. She started out as a matte painter, traditional matte painter back in the early '80s, working under Matt Yurisich. And so she trained under Matt Yurisich, and it was me, it was her, and it was Eric Chang in an office, and Rick Carter. That was it. So the three of us, so Rick would come in, and he would sit in that office with the three of us, and we would just go over the sets that we were developing, but it was always about story. It was always about driving the story forward, and I've never felt more like a filmmaker than I did during that period of time. It was one of the most rewarding periods I've ever had in all the work that I've done over the years. That period right there, working with Rick in that 2 months, was absolutely amazing. And the only other experience that I had where I really enjoyed it was working with Darren, and that was on
working
Tron.
with Darren. When you work with that guy, you're on a great show. That's just period. Like, there is no question about that, really.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Is like they had both just, when I was working on BFG, Rick was still working on Star Wars. Darren was still in England on Star Wars. Then when I got onto Tron, Darren had just gotten back from Star Wars. So so there was this really kind of weird ether that I was floating in, because I had just finished working with Rick, and now I'm working with Darren, and then it's just this, so your head's swimming, and you're just like, wow, God, I can't believe the people that I'm being surrounded by. It's just fantastic. So we're in a very exciting time in the sense that we're working with people who are raising the level of quality in the industry. I can't speak for the writing, but
for those who don't know,
we won't go there.
For those who don't know, Darren, we're talking about Darren Guilford, a production designer. He designed Tron, or the second Tron, which is fucking amazing looking film. He designed Oblivion. He was on Star Wars, the newest one, which I felt was an alright movie. It looked beautiful, but it was an alright movie. And we were on the show with him on the Tron 3, but that was canceled. Working with him, because he used to be an illustrator. He's a great illustrator. He's really good at it. Much like, I think he's from the same era as Ben Proctor and Dylan Cole and all those guys. And it's just that the pack of savages, the pack of fucking absolute badasses, if you will, like one of not only great illustrators, great designers, but also like super prolific minded people that always search for like the best solutions for everything. And one of the things that really struck me as really great with working with Darren is his understanding on someone asked actually a question here about radical deadlines and creative process and how in that usually getting a quality means that you need time to make it happen. And that was exactly the case with Darren. He would not be a person that would come in and say, hey, I need 30 versions of this by tomorrow, because that's not how design works. Design needs thinking process, and he would let you have that thinking process. And when he would hire you for a show, and you would be with Darren on the show, you're on that show because he trusts you that you are going to deliver the best you can, and you can handle your shit. You don't have to be told what you need to do. Obviously, you get the brief, you get to know what exactly we're after, and he's great at setting up those guidelines, the language that basically unifies the whole show and makes things look really great. He's amazing at it. But once he sees that you can speak the same language, he's just like hands off. You just do you just do exactly what you need to do. I don't need to tell you what you need to do because you're already doing it. And that was
Yeah.
one of the most profound experiences I had working in film, was especially with Darren, because he's just an amazing human being, man.
Yeah. Well,
I need to hit him up. I want to have him on the podcast. That'll be fucking amazing to have him
yeah.
on the
Oh,
podcast.
absolutely. I look forward to hearing that one. I mean, Rick Carter would be another one I'd love to, and Rick will talk your ear off. But talk about a history there. I mean, he's done some of the
Get me
most
introduced. I
prolific
want to
films.
have him on the podcast. I just doubt he would ever have time for it. That's the problem.
Well, you never know. I mean,
You never know. I can hit him
I'll
up.
tell you what. I would bet that Darren would probably, you get Darren, and then I bet you get Rick.
Yeah, I gotta
That's how
bug
you work
Darren.
it.
I gotta
You gotta bug
fucking.
Darren.
I don't know what I
Get
have to do if
Darren.
I have to suck his dick. That's gonna happen.
I don't know if you'd want that, but get Darren, and I bet you he could convince Rick to give you a little bit of time. I think he'd do it.
Yeah.
Rick's he's really great. He's just a real genuine guy, and I don't know. I had a great experience for him. I'm sure, like everybody in this industry, I'm sure somebody had a rough time with him on something. Maybe
Yeah,
even Darren.
I mean,
I don't, but that's just kind just the way this
yeah.
industry goes. It's you got to be a little bit thick-skinned.
Everyone's
about that,
different
so.
though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you might just have character traits that just don't click with one person
Yeah.
and click with
Yeah.
like there are people that absolutely hate working with Michael Bay, and there are people that just think that Michael Bay is the best fucking director to work with, and it's just such a contrasting opinion.
The funny thing is, I have a Michael Bay story because I got a call to work on this latest on Transformers 5 earlier this year, so I spent some time on that. And I told Todd, who's called me, and said, "Yeah, I'll come and help you out for a few months." I said, "But on one condition, that I never have to speak to Michael Bay." That was my only condition, is that I never had to speak to Michael Bay. He never came by, so it never was a problem. But it was just like, he's like, "It's okay, you won't have to. I'll make sure of it." I went, "Okay, thank you. Then I think we're good."
I know a few illustrators that would tell you that working with Michael Bay is the best experience. It's just a matter of like whether you click with a person or not. It's really that simple, I think.
Yeah, it's partly that, but I also think it also is what particular job you do for him.
Right.
There is a, I don't want to say preferential treatment, but illustrators tend to walk on a little bit different ground. I know you guys don't necessarily feel that way, but illustrators tend to walk on a little bit different ground than the rest of us. So, and I'm not saying that, in a negative way. I'm just saying that as a point of fact that you get the ear of the director. Set designers do not typically. Once in a while, they'll come and sit at your desk. Once in a while. But it's not like they're going to sit there and pick your brain as a set designer about the concept of the design. They're going to talk to the illustrator about that, or they're going to talk to the production designer, unless you're working direct. But never has there been an instance that I'm aware of where a director hired a set designer to come in and work out some ideas with them.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen.
I guess it's just a different set of expectations that comes with it, right?
So, yes, exactly. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying that's just the way it is. By virtue of the process. But the thing is that you may have a different experience with that director than, say, somebody else at a different level will have. So it's,
I know what you mean.
You have to kind of look at it. You can't look at it in a vacuum. You have to sort of see the bigger picture and see, that everything's a little bit different. So, but anyways, it's definitely you get some good ones and you get some bad ones.
Oh yeah, I mean, pretty much every director, art director, and production designer that that the films I've seen, I've at least heard one story about that person. A good story and really bad story too. So it's kind of interesting, yeah, for sure. All right, so I think what we're
Yeah.
gonna do next, because we're gonna be wrapping it up soon.
Yeah.
I think we're just
See a
gonna
lot of
jump
questions.
into some questions. Yeah, there's a few questions on the chat, and let's
Yeah.
answer them. I'll start with the one that kind of comes back to the idea or to the topic of cameras, and
Yeah.
that's from Pochang. I hope I'm not butchering your name, dude. If anything, I can blame it on my Polish potato ancestry. So when I use camera, should I think about composition and angle and perspective before I take photos, or just take it whenever I like?
All the above. Look, the camera is the extension of your eye. It's the tool that you're capturing the image that you see with your eye, right? So
Yeah.
what you're learning in using that camera is you're learning how to capture what your eye is seeing, right? So the advantage that it's giving you is the ability to take a seat behind the camera that you don't normally get to take a seat behind when you're down. When you're on set, you don't get to sit where the DP sits. So, but the DP walks in or the director walks in and they're looking at the set
DP
through
as
their
in
eyes.
director of photography.
Director of photography,
Yeah.
or DOP, depending on where you're from. So they use, obviously the camera is the medium that they're capturing the imagery on, and there's an aspect ratio and there's, all those things and the lenses and all that. But it's about, what I'm talking about when you're going out with a camera is just getting in the mindset of looking at things cinematically. And what I find helps the easiest in doing that is using a camera and getting out there and taking pictures, because now you're thinking about composition. Because what's happening is the difference between what's happening in your looking out of your eyes versus looking through a viewfinder is the viewfinder is putting a boundary on it, right? So with your eyes, you've got a much broader. Our eyes are equivalent to about a 50 millimeter lens, okay? But you can change that when you look through a lens on a camera, because now you can go to a 24 or you can go to 150 millimeter, and you're boxed in because of the framing to what you want to see. Now you can set up your composition based on that. Think of the frame of a camera is the frame of a picture frame of a painting hanging out on a wall. So it's the same thing. Is you're taking what you see in your eyes and you're putting a frame around it. You're just doing it through the lens of a camera, and you have the ability to change that format. And the interesting thing that you'll find out in terms of lenses is that, as you know, looking through a wide-angle lens, things change. We had this conversation. You want to make something look really massive, go to a longer lens, because what it's going to do is it's going to flatten everything. It's going to make something that may not look big in a 25 millimeter or 24 millimeter lens, but when you put a 75 or 150, it compresses everything, and now that object looks immense, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
It changes that, and so now you can get in there and start looking. There's a video on Vimeo that a guy put together, and it had to do with golden ratio, and he basically went through the entire film, which I'm now blanking on. It was Daniel Day-Lewis. He was an oil baron, and it was this. I'm trying to remember what it was called, but he basically lays the golden ratio or the rule of thirds frames over the video, over the film. So he took specific shots and he laid the golden ratio and the rule of thirds over it, so you could see how the director looked at that film and how he framed his shots. And it's absolutely brilliant. And I recommend it to anybody who wants to look at it. I'm going to look it up and see if I can find it here. But it
just send it over in chat for me so I can post it up later.
Yeah, it was There Will Be Blood. I'm trying to remember what it is, but I'll give it to you in a little bit.
Sure.
But it was really, really a great way to see how the director and the DOP were looking at that in terms of framing and how they blocked it out. Another really good film to look at for that kind of layout is Gladiator. Because Ridley Scott tends to do every frame like a painting, right?
Yep.
If you freeze frame any moment of that movie, you've got you really have got a painting, right? I know you've seen that movie, so it's one of those things where. So I don't want to drag out this question, but the point is that you're going there, you're going out and you're capturing what you see, and if you see something that really evokes an emotion or a response in you, you want to try to capture it. What you need to learn is how to capture it with a camera so that you can capture the feeling of the day. I do recommend going and looking at a website called Stuck in Customs. Trey Retcliffe is his name, is the guy that runs it, and he just travels around the world taking beautiful pictures. He's mostly known for doing high dynamic range images, and he's really kind of cutting edge photographer. He's been doing all kinds of crazy stuff. His latest thing now is actually having photographs that have slight motion in them. So he's shooting video and then he's freezing everything, and there's a software for it. So stuckincustoms.com, you can look it up, just type in Stuck in Customs. Brilliant stuff there, some beautiful imagery there. But using the camera to capture what you're seeing is really a good way to look at it. And the nice thing is once you've captured it, now you have that moment in time, right? So you take it home, you put it on your computer, you load it into Lightroom or whatever, and now you can post-process it if you want. You can crop it so that it's in a particular cinematic aspect ratio. Depends on how you want to treat it, but it just really gives you the advantage of looking at something through the lens of a camera. And I think it just makes you better at seeing things visually as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
But and I love it. I mean, for me, it's a great hobby because you're painting with light, which is what DPs do. They paint with light, right?
Yep.
You give them a set and it's just sitting there. The minute they start lighting it and shooting it, now they're painting with light, and that's what they get there. So hopefully that answers the question.
Oh, more than enough. Another one was, is it possible to study industrial design for entertainment with the use of internet at home, or do we necessarily have to go to university to get that knowledge? I would answer in short, you don't have to go to university, but I'm pretty sure you're gonna have something you want to add here too.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I went to no film.
There's
My
your
film
answer.
school was working, right? I personally feel that if you want to study film history, go to school. If you want to learn the history of film and the history of filmmaking, go to school. While you can go to schools that teach the craft of film, there's nothing better than being there in the environment doing it.
Yeah, being in trenches.
That's the best. Yeah, it's the best place to learn. Hands down, it's the best place to learn because you're going to have exposure to things you will never get exposed to in a classroom, right? So absolutely, I definitely recommend it. I did see in the feed, by the way, that it was somebody did find that Vimeo video. It's called Through the Numbers, and it's actually posted in the feed here. The questions.
Okay.
It's There Will Be Blood Through the Numbers on Vimeo. So he did post that. So at any rate, so hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, if anything I can add here to my simple question, no, is, I mean, I've personally, industrial design is sort of different than entertainment design. It's more focused on actually designing objects that are useful for us humans, or just generally designing objects that are in the general use, or even vehicle design would fall under that category, I think, as well. Yeah. So there's definitely some of the things you can learn by being in a university environment, but only, and I would say that's a big thing you have to take into consideration. Who is the faculty of that school? If the faculty is some random name that has absolutely no experience whatsoever of being in the industry, no recent work that have done and released and can prove that, hey, what I'm teaching is actually what is being used in the industry, I would stay the fuck away from that kind of school as much as possible.
Yeah, it's the difference between theory and practical application.
Yes.
And so you got to be careful about that. Now, in some schools like AFI, they actually have, some instructors actually are working professionals that are working during the day but teaching at night. So
Yeah.
if you can find an environment where you do find that, yes. Now, in regards to industrial design, what I will say as a follow-up to that and a comment to your statement was that when I started out, the guys that I was working for, Mark Stetson, George Trimmer, Chris Ross, Leslie Ecker, all those guys, they all came out of Art Center. They all came out of the industrial design and product design courses because there was no entertainment design back then.
Right.
Right. So
it was different
I don't
times
want to say that.
too. I mean,
different times. But what I want to say is I don't want to say that those should be disqualified, but they're not necessarily going to put you on the fast track to that environment. So
right. And Art
while
Center
it'll be a
is
beneficial
different.
thing.
Yeah,
and
I
Art Center's
agree.
got to. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think
it's difficult to have a conversation on on the phone where you don't see each other's faces. It almost seems like we're interrupting one another. It's a little different when you actually talk to face, obviously. But no, I agree with you 100%. Art Center is only one art center in the world. That's the thing.
Right.
It's a school that has produced so many amazing designers that going there, that you're gonna get a quality education, but also it means that you're gonna work your ass off because it's one of the hardest schools I think out there in the first place.
Yeah.
It's also really expensive.
Yeah.
So if you can afford it, then go for it. But if you cannot, I wouldn't stress. Nobody cares about your paper. Nobody cares if you have MBA or not. Nobody gives a fuck.
They want to know if you can show up on time and produce.
Yes.
That's what they want to know. What will set you apart and what will keep you working the most is how well you produce. And first of all, how fast you produce, but then secondly, how good is your design aesthetic? And so I think, like I said, I did not go to any school for that. It's just sort of something I have a love for, and I spend an inordinate amount of time surfing the web, studying things now, and which has been the greatest thrill of my life because I had to do all this stuff before the internet. Doing research, I had to do it the old-fashioned way, but
library.
but that's why I started that Pinterest page, which is now got quite a few followers. But is because it was a way for me to really start that process. And I an interesting thing is part of my morning routine now is when I get into the office. I usually get into the office between 15 and 30 minutes ahead of call time. And what I'll do is I get my computer up, I'll get everything up, I'll get my coffee, I get all ready. First thing I do is I pull up a browser, I pull up Pinterest, I pull up Flickr, I pull up Tumblr, I pull up ArtStation and a couple other things. And I go surfing. And I'll go through Pinterest and I'll see what the latest feed items have popped up. And I'll just start collecting stuff. And there's a couple other websites, architectural websites that I like to visit. And I do that for about 15 to 30 minutes. I'm not looking for anything in particular. I'm not looking to solve any problems. I'm just looking. I'm just exploring. And if I see something that seems interesting to me, I pin it. And it's really just to get the creative juices flowing. But it also is to expose me to a wide variety. And this is what I love about Pinterest, is it exposes me to a wide variety of things: vehicles, products, industrial design, industrial decay, architecture, clothing, you name it, it's all there. So when you're doing stuff like that and you're studying things like that, don't study in a vacuum. Don't look at things or collect things in a vacuum. Don't just collect other artists' work. Don't just collect, other artists' techniques and tutorials and all those things. Develop those things on your own. It's good to get inspired by those things, but collect other things that are outside your norm, because the more of a broad scope that you see of the world from a design standpoint, the better you are, because you don't know what you're going to do on the next project. You might be designing, a light cycle on this project, but on the next project, you're designing a 19th century orphanage. Yeah. So in terms of that, it's really more about, and you can go to a school and they can sit there and you can have somebody stand there and say blah, 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 this, and that's great. and hopefully it'll stick. But if you're doing it because you want to do it, you're going to retain it better and you're going to learn from it more versus just having somebody pontificate to you. At least that's for me. I've learned more in just watching and researching, and and again, I'm a little OCD when it comes to Pinterest. I admit it.
You have the most epic Pinterest that is out there. Basically, when you launch the Pinterest, that's the sound that should be there. That's the sound when you open it up. It's the fist that comes out of the screen and punches you in the face. You know what I mean?
There's a few there. There are definitely a few there, and it's jumped. I mean, it went from I think I had like 300 followers, and then you asked if you could repost it, and it jumped from 300 to over 3,000 in a couple of weeks.
Nah, you had more than 300.
I think it was about 300 actually.
Really?
When you first discovered it, was only about 300 people.
It must be all the amazing followers of this podcast that was just like, oh my God.
It must be. Well, it's everybody following you too, so that makes a difference. And I have a lot of artists there, and I have a lot of different things. But I cover the range. And then Flickr is another one that I've become obsessed with because there's a lot of great stuff in there. And all of the, just so in case everybody doesn't know this, any government website, any government Flickr page are all going to have incredibly high resolution images on them.
Yeah. I've noticed that for sure.
Average is about 4 to 5K images. So the official U.S. Navy, NASA's got, I think, 5 or 6 web pages. The European Space Agency, any of the observatories have them. I mean, there's on and on and on. I've got dozens that are bookmarked. They have really high resolution quality. I mean, I have my own Flickr page. I've got, a bunch of stuff that's, more landscapey stuff that I've shot just because I'm shooting it for myself. But I've got an entire air show that I photographed there for textures and for details for hard surface modeling. And there's 749 images on that album alone. So those are out there for people to use. But it's what inspires you, what gets you going, what kind of excites you, but that's the kind of thing that I like to do, and I like to get out there. So as an industrial designer, obviously it's a different technique, because when you're designing for industrial design, you're designing for something to go through the full manufacturing process from design to shelf. We aren't doing that. We just have to make it look like it did that, right? So there's a point there, but there are, like I said, the quality has changed for us, and so there's a lot of things that you have to kind of do. So again, hopefully that doesn't over answer it, but
no, it's all good. We control the format of this podcast, or live stream, so it's all good. It's it's informative, and that's what it's all about. I'm gonna go through maybe 2 more questions.
Okay.
Obviously, sorry that we cannot answer all of them, but we try. Let me find a random one. Is it possible to use a parametric design as a workflow? For instance, Rhino, Grasshopper.
Absolutely, and a lot of guys do. There's certain, like on Tomorrowland, I was using it a little bit for some of the architecture. Part of it is just the time, because sometimes some of these setups, like especially with Grasshopper, it takes a little bit of time to set all that up, and you could set something up to do a wide range of things, and it's still, and inevitably what will happen is the production designer will come and ask you to do something that has nothing to do with any of the settings you just did, and you essentially have to throw it all away. So there is a risk involved in there that you start going too far down a path that you may have to just toss it out if you don't have all the different things. So, and you can't account for every variable. You just can't. And so I won't say no, because I would be lying, because you and I both know people that do use it on a daily basis and use it brilliantly.
It's a very specific workflow, super specific.
If you're comfortable with it, then use it. If it's the way you work and you can flow through it, and you can do it, and you can recover from major changes fairly quickly, go for it. like I said, my brain works a little differently. Rhino tends to favor that. So it's a little more loosey-goosey. It's a little more free flow. It's a little more hectic in terms of, just the organization. So if you're really, really OCD in that respect, but you have to pick a software that you work best with. It's just kind of the way it goes. So I won't sit here and specifically say, go buy this software, because you may want a specific type. There are softwares that will not do certain things that you want. For example, SketchUp is not going to produce a file that gives you an engineering model that can be milled cleanly. You can do it, but you're going to have some errors and you're going to have some resolution issues depending on how well you modeled it. So you just have to understand what the limitations of each of these software packages are, and one of those limitations may be your pocket. So you have to keep that in mind. Rhino is still, and has been since day one, $9.95 to buy it, right? And so when you compare that to 360 or SolidWorks, which you can get up into thousands and thousands of dollars for these software packages, if you can afford that, great. But if you don't want to, or if you can't, then but you can get into Rhino. You can get there is a Mac version. I will say my one negative comment about software will be that the Mac version is not the Windows version, not yet anyway. So I would say that if you're on a Windows computer, stick with that one. If you're on a Mac version, you can still use it. It's just going to be limiting in certain things. So just understand that going in. So
for sure. Let's jump to the last one. I'm skipping through some, but I found that one pretty interesting. Will there be more instances for freelance concept artists to do pre-production work remotely in the future for Hollywood films? I live in Southeast Asia, by the way.
I think you could probably answer that better than I, because my particular end of things is it's definitely something that happens occasionally, but more often than not, it's not because of the union thing. But I know that with the illustrators, it's a much different story. So I think I might leave that question to you.
Okay. What I would say, yes, I think it's going to be changing towards more remote work because it's just simply cheaper in some cases, especially when it comes to pre-production work, or rather like pitch phase, where it's not really yet the art department. It's more like you're working with a director or producer. In that cases, it's already happening, and it's going to happen more and more. One of the benefits of being at the art department with production designer is the fact that the communication is much better than if you're freelancing. That's just given. It's much easier to get changes done. It's much easier to do certain things compared to if you would have to be working offline, right? So even though it might be a little cheaper to have people work remotely, in the film environment, the mistakes you might be making during the process might actually cost more money to be fixed than if you would be on site, or maybe maybe compared to hiring someone who costs more, but the fact that he's on site, or the fact that he produces the best quality of work sort of like removes the like or tightens the threshold of error, right? It doesn't turn out to be like a run of designs that just go nowhere because there's a lack of communication or a lack of quality. Let's put it this way. It's definitely going to be easier, but it's not going to be a rapid change, I don't think. I think it's still it's almost like with film specifically, I'm looking at the way the incentives work, the way the films are being made. Majority of them start in LA and then get shifted to Atlanta, Louisiana, pretty much all around the world. But funny thing, what is happening is just like, we don't know where the incentives programs are going. For what we know, the towns and cities that are giving incentives for film industry usually end up really bad in the budget, and they after 3-4 years they just decide, fuck it, we're not going to do this, because the benefits of having incentives program versus or let's put the cost of putting incentive programs versus the benefits that you get for having
Yeah.
it it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Um, it's if anything, it's just really difficult for the art department people. You know, when you want to work in the art department, unless you're an illustrator. And again, illustrators have it. I gotta say, have it easier in film, especially if you're you know top tier illustrators. It's even easier too. But most of the illustrators can work from home, especially when the show goes somewhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe few of them going to be asked to come along. Usually they take one or two to have one or two on site, which makes a lot of sense, especially when the film is actually like when the sets are being built and things being filmed. They usually want to have someone like on a call, like fuck, we need to change this right now, right? And that person is
Right.
just like
Right.
shitting their pants, like, oh my god, I only have 10 minutes to do this.
Right.
um,
Well, yeah, that's where the time frame can be a dramatic effect. If you've got a guy that's, doing stuff for you and he's based out of Australia, right? So he's on a different time schedule than you are. You're not going to call him to redo something in an hour, right? You're going to go to the guy that's in the art department that you do have in the art department. He's going to do it because you need it in an hour. So it's one of those things where it can work if your schedule allows it, but it can also backfire if the guy that you need work to be done in a hurry is not available to do it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I don't think it's going away. I don't think it's going to take over completely. I think there's going to always be that element. I think there's always going to be an element of there's going to be people from, if the show goes to Atlanta or wherever, Vancouver or wherever, there's going to be a component of people that come from here in Los Angeles. There's going to be a component of people that come from other parts of the country. There's going to be people from other countries that come here. The film industry is catching up to all the other industry in the world in that it's globalizing. The problem is the industry hasn't got a system designed to deal with that.
Yeah,
right? We're a system. You have to remember that films have been made in Los Angeles, in Southern California, for the better part of 100 years, right? So it's only been in the last 15 years, 20 years that this migration has happened. And you've watched many, many businesses locally go out of business because of it. They all depended on the film. But they're not film business. They're not film companies. They're just suppliers that are local that have
the infrastructure
supplied to the studios for years. They're all going out of business. So the dynamic is changing, but the industry doesn't have a way to compensate for that because it's unlike anything that this industry's ever had to deal with because it's always been here.
Yeah.
That's changed. And so it affects not only studios, it affects individuals. And so, again, it's just going to boil down to that same thing we talked about earlier about production designers. You find a production designer that does not have a problem with you working remotely or does not have a problem hiring you because you're in another country, or hires you because you bring something to the table that he likes. You're not necessarily better than somebody he has here. You just have something of quality that he likes. And he can work out the schedule to where you're doing things that won't impact him schedule-wise.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work that way, but it's a changing thing. So don't discount it. But as far as making it happen, if you're a person that's not here, because plenty of people have done it, but it's just understand that it's an ongoing process. It's an evolution that's happening right now, and it's going to continue on for some time. And we're all being affected by it, not just those who are trying to get in, but those who are in and have been doing this a long time are being affected by it. So, hopefully everybody will do fine. We'll see.
Yeah, pretty sure at the end of the day, you have to be frugal. You have to be on top of everything, and you have to really consider and look if there is a writing on the wall. And when you see the writing on the wall, like you did with model making, just react and adapt. Industries tend to change constantly. Even video games, concept art for video games was totally different back in the days than it is right now.
Yeah.
And if you're adaptive to change, if you can quickly, transform the way you work and maybe focus on something else when you need to, and and really, all right, this is the time I need to learn this, and this is the time I need to do that. That's when um, you're gonna keep yourself in the business. That's how you're gonna keep yourself,
Yeah.
hireable. Because I know, like
Yeah.
for instance, it's the good example here. There's I don't know how many thousand of illustrators that are in the union, but only hundreds of them work. And the reason is simple. Some of the illustrators just stopped working in the film. Some of them got old enough and they don't want to do this anymore. But there's always a bunch of people that just couldn't adapt. And
Are you referring to people specifically that are just in the union, or people in general?
I think in general,
Union and
but
non-union.
I've noticed that in the union specifically too. Not necessarily with the people I've been working with, but
Yeah.
I've seen that pattern. I've heard it from many illustrators that they've noticed this. Like, yeah, you have to adapt. I
Yeah.
think one of the most cool lessons that, or cool things that our friend Paul Ozimo was saying, like you
Hmm.
have to be on top of the software and changes and hardware. You have
Yeah.
to do the work that is making you hired, because if you're not, then nobody will care. Like, you will just fade away,
Right.
and it
Yep.
doesn't really matter what your taste is really like. I mean, unless you are Sid Mead level of designer, where it's just like you
Yeah.
you are the shit, right? Or like you're a
Yeah.
Daniel Simon, for instance.
Yeah.
You are
But how
one of a
often does that
kind
happen?
that
Yeah.
no one else can do the work. In
Yeah.
a lot of cases, illustrators, I mean, Daniel will be hired for a very specific thing, and that's going to be probably
Right.
the major part of the film. But he will
Right.
work on that one thing on this film, right?
Right.
Whereas
Right.
some illustrators and designers will be hired for many things. Like, there's just
Right.
so much stuff that has to be covered in the film, that has to be done. That it's almost like you're becoming a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
But some of the best
What you want
designers,
to? Yeah.
they are there just to have. Uh, yeah, you're here because you're gonna design this shit, because you're the
Yeah.
shit, right? You're gonna be designer of this.
Yeah.
Then
Well,
you have the
they're getting you
leeway.
for your name.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then you don't
Yeah.
have to, you can work in pencils if you want. I mean, as long as
Right.
you are the household name, that's.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise
Well,
you
and
have
that,
to.
but I was going to say, but they have to be careful, because that can have a life of its own. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
and it can be a long life, or it could be a very short life. I mean, I know that Sid doesn't do as much film work as he used to. All right. He did a promotional thing with, it's kind of funny, on Tomorrowland. He did this promotional painting for Tomorrowland when they came out with the movie, but he wasn't in the art department. He wasn't part of that process. I mean, we would have been thrilled to have him there. It would have been fantastic to have him a part of that process, but he simply wasn't part of that process.
But does he really
That
need
was
to be?
something that,
That's the question. Does he really need
yeah,
that work anymore at this
but his
moment of
his
time?
involvement was much less. So you have to, when you're somebody like Sid Mead or Daniel Simon. Yes, you've got a name out there and you're known globally, but does that keep getting you hired? Or at one point, what is the diminishing rate of return on that? I mean, having that notability and that being very limited in terms of, now I'm not saying that either of those guys are limited. I'm sure they could do whatever they wanted, but they're known for a certain thing.
Right.
So it's about how much can that carry. As far as the number of people, I think as far as the Art Directors Guild is concerned, there's only about 200 illustrators or 250 illustrators.
Right.
There's, as far as set designers, I think it's about the same. Might be a little more, maybe like 300. Art directors, there's over 2,000. So lots of managers.
I feel for art directors though, dude.
I do too. I think they got the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
No,
Some of the art directors get paid less than some set designers and illustrators. That's just insane. That's insane. The amount of work they have to do. Like, they are basically making the show, dude. And
they got shafted.
Yeah, they get shafted hard. All right, man. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. That was a
Okay.
really cool conversation, dude. One of the
Yeah, I
most
enjoyed it.
informative ones we had in a long time, and I really appreciate that. So
Anytime.
I'm gonna try
Anytime.
to get Darren. I need to see what's up with him. I know he was working on the show recently. I don't know where's that going. I just need to hear from him.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
No,
keep
I get.
bugging him. See if that works out. That would be great. I'll be literally stoked to have him on a podcast, talk a little bit about production design, and you know, catch
Yeah.
up with him. That would be amazing. No promises, guys. This is just me having wishes here, and
Yeah.
um and maybe it's gonna work out.
You
If
might.
it does, then it's gonna be awesome.
You might be able to swing him in there. You know, just yeah. You never know.
Yeah.
Most of it's going to depend on his schedule, I think. So if he has the time to break away. So I happen to be in between, you know, over the weekend. So it kind of worked out really good. So, but yeah, anytime I'd love to do this again. So anytime you want to chat,
Yep.
it was a lot of fun, and hopefully everybody enjoyed it and got the. Sorry we couldn't get all your questions. I'd love to
No
answer.
worries.
Maybe I can answer more some other way. So. But,
All right, let's wrap it up.
cool.
And
All right, man.
thanks for everyone for coming. If you like the show, subscribe. If you don't, I don't care. Just keep watching. It's all good. It's all free.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
take care, dudes. And we're going to have
too.
the end of the week. We're going to have Shadi Safari. We actually moved that one to Thursday morning. So pay attention to it's actually scheduled in the YouTube. So you can check it out there on the channel. It's going to tell you when exactly that is. Scott, thanks again for being here and spending this
You're
time
very
with
welcome.
us. And
Thank you. Thank you.
and everyone else, thanks for your time. And till the next time.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good night.
Yep. Bye.